The sun was setting over the dusty plains of Texas, the sky painted in fire and gold, as the wind carried whispers of secrets. Across the prairie, and in the small frontier town of Dry Creek, a storm was brewing that had nothing to do with the weather. It was about a girl, a cowboy in a line no decent man would let be crossed. Her name was Clara, a young woman of 19 summers with eyes, the color of storm clouds and a spirit that refused to bend. Yet to the men who controlled the town, ruthless ranchers and lawless hands drunk on power, she was nothing more than property, a prize to be traded, used, and owned. They had taken her father's land after his death, forcing her into servitude under a cruel man, who saw her not as a human, being but as a commodity to buy and sell. And when Clara's cries for help fell on deaf ears, when the townsfolk lowered their heads rather than risk angering the powerful, she thought hope had fled from her life. That was until Luke Carson rode into town, a cowboy with eyes as sharp as the edge of a blade, a man who carried not only a Colt at his side but also a sense of justice too fierce to be silenced. For Luke had fought battles before, not always with bullets but with heart grit and an unshakable belief that no man, no matter how strong, had the right to break another's soul. Luke first saw Clara when she was being dragged from the mercantile by two hired hands, her wrists bound, her face streaked with dust and tears, and when she stumbled, one of the men struck her hard enough to send her to the ground, laughter spilling from the saloon porch as if cruelty was entertainment. Luke dismounted without a word, his boots stirring up the dust as he stepped between Clara and the brutes, his voice calm but deadly as he said, "You boys best unhand her, unless you're looking to spend the night in hell." They sneered at him, calling her property, claiming she was bought and paid for, but Luke's jaw tightened, and with every muscle in his body coiled like a rattlesnake ready to strike, he said the words that silenced the street. "Not while I'm breathing." The air went still, the laughter died, and the town held its breath as Luke reached down, lifting Clara gently to her feet, his hand steady on her back, his presence like a shield against all the ugliness around her. Guns were drawn, threats were hissed, but Luke moved faster than thought itself, disarming one, knocking the other cold, his fists and his resolve unshaken. With Clara behind him, trembling but unbroken, Luke faced down the men who called themselves her masters, telling them plain and clear that she wasn't property. She was a woman, and if they wanted to test him on it, they'd best be ready to meet their maker. That night, the saloon filled with whispers of the stranger who dared defy the town's cruel order, of the cowboy whose courage lit a fire no tyrant could smother. Clara, though shaken, felt something in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, burning bright and fierce, a spark that told her she was not alone anymore. Luke didn't stop at words. He fought for her every step of the way, not just against men with guns, but against the very belief that someone like Clara could be owned. And with each passing day as he stood guard, as he taught her to hold her head high, she began to see herself not as a victim, but as a person worthy of love, respect, and freedom. The final showdown came when the rancher himself rode into town, backed by half a dozen hired killers, demanding Clara's return, his voice booming through the street like thunder. But Luke stepped out from the shadows, his hat low, his hand steady on his revolver, and with a crowd gathering, he declared loud enough for all to hear that this wasn't about one woman. It was about the soul of the town, about whether they would live forever under fear or rise up and claim their dignity. The gunfight that followed was brutal, quick, and decisive, with Luke's bullets finding their marks and the townsfolk, emboldened by his bravery, finally standing beside him to drive the last of the oppressors out of, Dry Creek. When the smoke cleared and the dust settled, Clara stood in the middle of the street, free at last, her eyes meeting Luke's with a gratitude that words could never capture. And for the first time, she felt not like a piece of property but like a woman reborn. Together they walked forward, side by side, into a new dawn that promised not just survival but the possibility of love, partnership, and a life where no chain could bind her spirit again. And so, the legend of Luke Carson and Clara spread across the frontier, a story of defiance, hope, and a cowboy's unyielding vow that as long as he had breath, no woman would be treated as less than human. Friends, if you enjoyed this powerful Western tale of courage, love, and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring cowboy stories that touch the heart and keep you hooked till the very end. Your support helps bring these stories to life. So hit that subscribe button and ride with us into the next adventure.